Hello there and welcome to the presentation. Today I'm going to be speaking about the Great Purge, which took place in Russia between 1936 and 1939, while Stalin was chairman of the Communist Party. And I've got here to start with a definition for what the word purge means. And it says here, to get rid of whatever is considered impure or undesirable. Now, communists believe that the need of the nation far outweighs the need of the individual, as taught in Marxist theory. Therefore, the following three aspects are considered to be impure to communism. The first is class. They believe that there should be no divide between the upper and lower ranks, that we should all be even. The second is privatisation or capitalism. They believe that the state should own all trade and be in charge of economic growth. And the third is religion. Religion is very opposed to Marxist theory. And Michael Lynch, in his work Stalin's Russia 1924 to 53, says that the Great Purge took place in three areas. First being the purge of the party. The party itself was investigated for any fault that was seen to be opposed to the regime or the leader. The second was the purge of the armed services, where all ranks within the military were also investigated. And third was the purge of the people, where the populace was looked into regarding ownership of any religious material, any literature, any art that was opposed to the regime. So how were these purges carried out? Well, the accused would be taken to a show trial, which was a public adjudication held to determine the level of their guilt. The problem, though, was that many of them had been beaten and tortured to the point of a false confession. Some even had their families threatened. Now, after sentencing, they could be imprisoned in a concentration camp called a gulag. In the gulag, they'd be subject to severe conditions, carrying out hard labour and being rehabilitated, and they could be there for many years. Or they could be executed and shot in the back of the head. What were the causes of the Great Purge? Historians note many different factors that could have started it. The first most commonly debated one is his own personality. He's believed to have been a very paranoid individual, seeing threats everywhere. In 1929, when he became chairman of the Communist Party, he had just outmaneuvered a series of rivals who had been his allies. These included Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenov and Bukharin. Now, following these, they were all either imprisoned, exiled, or banned from the party. However, Stalin continued to see threats everywhere. Another aspect is believed to have been grief. In 1932, his second wife, Nadezhda Aliyeva, shot herself following a disagreement with him and ongoing conflicts. Now, sources really do conflict over how much Stalin grieved over this. Some say he was unaffected and carried on normally. They didn't even attend the gravesite, and he at times even blamed her for betraying him. In other cases, some say he became isolated, was grief-stricken, and attended the gravesite every single day. So you have two different views. What is largely believed is that as Stalin got older, he became more isolated, more removed, which I personally feel suggests that he did have a strong level of grief there. Another factor was his own background. His parents are noted to have been quite oppressive to him. Robert Service, for example, in his biography of Stalin, says that Stalin was subject to much abuse from his father, while Chris Korin and Terry Fane in Russia Under Tsarism and Communism say that actually his mother was more abusive. But either way, it still suggests that he had some childhood trauma. As well as this, he was bullied. And Robert Service describes him as having a Georgian sense of honour, which means that he became very vengeful. Another reason for the Great Purge was Stalin's need to control the party and population by terror and force. So in the 1920s he had overthrown his old rivals, and he had sentenced them to exile or imprisonment. However, in the 1930s, during the Great Purge, he switched tactics and began to execute. In this way, he was removing all political threats without any further consequences. Another reason for the Great Purge was the issue of economy. After the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, when the Tsars had been overthrown, Russia really was economically weak. Lenin, Stalin's predecessor, as well as Stalin himself, believed that they needed to carry out rapid industrialization in order to strengthen Russia and make it strong again. As a result, Stalin had carried out the first 5-year plan, which collectivized the populace and really got everyone working hard towards his economic goals at the expense of their own lives in cases. Now, in the early 30s, they began to debate and question whether they wanted to continue rapid industrialization. Many candidates voted against it and wanted to slow down. As a result, Stalin used the Great Purge to get rid of those who opposed with his view of continuing on at a rapid pace. Another factor, of course, was to remove all anti-Soviet thoughts and beliefs, anything including religious practice, literature, art and such, as I discussed in the introduction. When you consider that Stalin was a very paranoid individual who always thought there were threats going against him within the party, the Ryutin affair in 1932 could be seen as quite significant, even though it was a couple of years before the Great Purge started. What happened was Ryutin, a member of the Communist Party, issued a 200-page document to the Central Committee, the Communist Government's committee, stating that Stalin was an evil genius who had brought the revolution to the verge of destruction. And obviously to Stalin this was very damning, but it also opposed his plans for industrialization. In response, Stalin wanted him executed, however, the party would not allow this. However, the Ryutin himself and his supporters were purged and expelled from the party, and this was just a prelude of what was to come. An immediate cause of the Great Purge was the death of Sergei Kirov. Now, Sergei Kirov was a popular member of the Communist Party. He had openly challenged Stalin's views on industrialization, which had gained favour, and Stalin was probably very, very concerned about this individual. Although Stalin is not evidenced to have been involved in the murder, key figures such as Khrushchev, Stalin's successor, say that he was most likely involved. Regardless, Stalin started a campaign to find Kirov's murder. This started the Great Purge, and he used this as an excuse to wipe out many of his enemies accused now of being involved. So we know that the Great Purge started under the pretense of finding Sergei Kirov's murderer. In truth, Stalin was using this to justify his selection of who he wanted removed. For example, in the late 1930s, he had some of his former colleagues, Zinoviev, Kamenov, Bukharin and others, taken out of confinement, put on show trials, and then executed, claiming they were involved in the murder. As such, thousands of party members were either arrested or killed, and the old Bolshevik order began to phase away while the younger generation began to take its place. Professional occupations were also targeted, such as education, medicine, the armed forces. For example, 3 out of 5 marshals in the armed forces were arrested. Religion was also a target. The Orthodox Church, which had been the main religion of Russia before the Bolshevik Revolution, was badly affected, with 105,200 priests killed between 1937 and 1938 and 87,500 arrested. Following this, Stalin began to order the areas to come up with a number of people to purge, were called quotas, and he ordered them to come up with a specific number, otherwise they themselves would be ridiculed, denounced or executed. In doing so, he forced them to come up with random names of selections. In 1939, Russia was suffering from great difficulties. Its decreased population meant that administration systems were beginning to break down, the government was beginning to crumble, industrial decline was taking place due to lack of available personnel, and the armed forces were severely weakened, at a time when Hitler was also becoming an increasing threat. As such, Stalin called off the Great Purge, claiming that its excesses were due to faults from the NKVD, its secret police, and its former leader Yekov. However, purges did still continue, just at a lower scale.